On the agenda today, what we're going to cover. I think the most important thing to note today is we've got quite a wide range of people in our audience. And I think you are all representing organizations that would be at different ends of the scale in terms of sophistication when it comes to collections. So I'm hoping that there will be something for everybody here, whether you are running your collections off spreadsheets or whether you are using multiple scorecards or looking at machine learning. I think there will be something for everybody and everybody in between as well. So hopefully, if you don't think I cover anything in enough detail, well, that's because of time, but I'm happy to take questions at the end and then happy to have off-site discussions with you too and with my colleagues. Okay, so we're just going to look a little bit about Principa, just to give you some context. Lamel's introduced us briefly. I'll just give you a little bit more context. We're going to look at Collections 2020. These are the themes that have come out of Collections 2020. I'm not just talking about Kenya, but I'm talking about internationally. The different types of scorecards. So we're going to jump into scoring. The main focus today is scoring. There are other topics in collections which are very topical right now. Lemuel's mentioned some of them, but we are going to focus today on scoring because that is one of the top topics at the moment. And once we've discussed all the different types of scorecards, we're going to move into how the scorecard can be embedded in a collection strategy. Then we're going to talk about bringing all the models together. Then we're going to talk a little bit about machine learning, that buzzword of the last 5 years. Machine learning, everybody talks about it, everybody wants to do it. Let's talk about what are the practicalities involved and how this is affected in collections. Then we're going to look at some other models, contactability also used in collections, and also settlement models also used in collections. So just some additional considerations there. And then at the end, we've got our Q&A. Okay, so this is me. My background is in credit and collections, and I've worked in South Africa, but we at Principa, we advise clients across the continent and into the Middle East and even into Europe. I worked in banking, but I work with retailers, I work with banks, I work with microfinance, I work with unsecured lenders, micro lenders, vehicle asset finance organizations. So we covered quite a wide range of organizations at Principa. And I'm very passionate. My background is mathematics. I'm very passionate about bringing analytics into the operational space, which is what the topic today is all about. Just about Principa, that little map there reflects our footprint on the continent. It's mainly around Anglophone Africa. We work with mostly the English-speaking countries within Africa. And we've got some presence in Kenya and have done. In fact, one stage we even had an office up in Kenya as well. We've been around for about 21 years, and we offer services around analytics, software, and consulting. The top right here is our sort of hexagon. There's a big, we like to bring it all together. So whether it's analytics and predictive modeling, we produce about 70 billion scores annually for clients around the continent. Whether it's, we then bring in advisory services, and then we also have our own software as well, which I'll talk a little bit about. And then we plow about 20% of our revenue back into innovation as well. Okay, just on our software side of things, and this is very much how we see the market of software. So you don't need to focus on the names per se, but these are the areas. And I think today we're going to be speaking about the red and the green component here. But we've got onboarding software, AppSmart, the blue. We've got account management software, that's the purple. We've got collection software, collection management systems, the red, that's CollectSmart. Then it's all bound together by decisioning, which is where scorecards reside, and that's the green, that's DecisionSmart. And then also through our API hub, BridgeSmart, which brings in the data. So these are the core components that you need in the credit space. We're going to focus today quite a bit on the red and the green, as I said before. Okay, so let's look at Collections 2020. So it's no surprise, and I'm sure most of you are in the collection space, or maybe you're in the modeling space, but you'll be very aware that globally there's been immense pressure in collections. We've written about it. We have some blogs that we post every month on this, and we've looked at, in one of our blogs, we looked at what are the different actions around the world, but pretty much everywhere, payment holidays have been offered, special dispensation by governments have been offered to give relief to customers, whether it's registration of negative data on the bureaus, like what has happened in Kenya, or whether it's just the idea of payment holidays and such relief. Nevertheless, banking non-performing loan rates have skyrocketed to about 4 times the normal rates. I think the last financial crisis of 2008, we were around about 2.5. So it's quite considerably worse than what it has been. And I think a lot of the pressure then is focused in the collection space. And I think as a result, lenders are having to find a way to be innovative to improve collection performance, which is different to what they were doing previously. So some of the themes that have come up over the last few years, over the last few months, starting at the top, treat customers fairly. This is legislation that we find coming into Africa more and more. It's bigger in Europe at the moment, in the States as well, is treat your customer fairly. And so the harsh actions you might have taken before COVID, you're needing to rethink that and offer the customer some relief options as well. So that's one of the big themes. Self-service collections has also come up. So the growth in chatbot technology around the world has meant that the use of chatbots for self-service collections is becoming more and more popular. Countries like Australia, for example, a large portion of their collections is actually run through self-service. So they send a message to a customer, and the customer actually captures a promise to pay directly and can do payments directly through the chat channel. So that's self-service collections. Payment holidays is big. So we saw pretty much, I think some countries ceased to age books for 9 months. I think places like Saudi Arabia, other countries really 3 months. I mean, in South Africa, we were about 3 months or 4 months. Organizations gave payment holidays to selective customers based on that. Other customers did it to their entire book. Other lenders did it to their entire book. So there's been a variety of different options when it comes to payment holidays. And what we're finding now is that the payment holidays have come to an end, and there's a big demand for collections now. Big pressure on collections as accounts roll forward. Data wrangling is another thing. Organizations are finding value in utilizing a variety of data, not just collections data, but dialer data, for example, credit bureau data as well. All of that within the collection space, and that means that data wrangling is quite important, and particularly when we come to machine learning. My last point there, machine learning is also quite important and has come up in certain organizations. Quite the advanced ones are adopting machine learning now to improve their collections. In the middle, scorecards. They're not just your probability of default scorecard, which is your classic scorecard to use in collections, but there's a whole host of other scorecards that are now being used within the collections, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then decision engines are coming into collections. Decision engines normally have their comfortable home within originations as they manage scoring in that space. But as scorecards are being used more and more in collections, so decision engines are having to calculate those scores and are being used within the collection process. We'll cover a little bit more about that later. Then artificial intelligence, as I said, chatbots are coming up. Machine learning as well is coming up. And then digital collections is a big space. Using different channels from a digital perspective to enable collections is very important. Okay, so those are the things we're going to look at, but we're going to really hone in today on the middle one, which is scorecards. So the first question I want to ask you is, how far has your collection team evolved over the years? We see, this is how we like to look at the market from the adoption of mathematical models or scorecards. We sort of see an evolutionary trend wherever we go, and we deal with organizations right away in the orange space, right the way up to the yellow space as well. So the first area is spreadsheets, organizations that are just collecting off spreadsheet, no logic to what they do on that spreadsheet, just a list of accounts they need to collect on. So that's the first step in the evolutionary stage from a collections perspective. The next one is just tree strategy. This is now pouring your accounts through a tree and then organizing your accounts and prioritizing them based on the tree. So you would have your high priority accounts maybe related to high balances and your low priority accounts related to low balances as an example. And broken promises to pay, for example, might also have a high priority. So that's a tree strategy, pure tree strategy. The next step up is a single scorecard, and now you would use that in a tree strategy. This is utilizing a single scorecard. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that becomes the next step. Then the following step is multiple scorecards, to use multiple scorecards in your collection strategy. And then the final step is really using mathematical optimization within it. So you've got an understanding of your capacity of your team. You've got an understanding of the urgency of getting hold of people. You've got an understanding of the balance at risk of your accounts. How do you bring it all together into a single problem that you can solve through mathematics? And that's where we bring in mathematical optimization. It is very tricky. But it is a classic case of operations research and can be deployed ultimately. Okay, so which draws me through to the next point I want to make, and this is what we call the collection cascade. So we talk about multiple scorecards. The reason why we have multiple scorecards is because what affects yield is not one thing, but actually multiple things. So if you look at the diagram on the right, probability of contact. If we can improve that, we will have a lower drop-off. Based on the drop-off the ones that we get hold of in the contact perspective, then we've got probability of right person contact. So we're getting hold of the wrong person. But if we get hold of the right person, we have a low drop-off there, then we look at trying to capture a promise to pay. And if the ones we don't capture a promise to pay are the drop-off, and the ones we do, that we keep them, and they become then it becomes probability of payment. So if you start improving any one of those items, you will start improving the bottom item and ultimately the yield. And if you don't, then you will get diminishing returns. Okay, so some of the ingredients to help achieve all of this is a well-trained team, usable data, which is critical, effective models and scorecards, and then appropriate systems in which to deploy those models and scorecards. Okay, so the use of scorecards across all of those different areas is what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so move directly onto the scorecard part of the presentation. There are multiple collection scorecards, each with a particular purpose. This is not a full list. There are additional scorecards that we know that particularly some really advanced external debt collectors are using within the collection space. But these are some of the very common scorecards that we see. And I've actually categorized them all into collection scorecards, then contactability scorecards, the red, the pre-delinquency is the yellow, payment scorecards, and finally the other scorecards being the black. So what do we talk about with collection scorecards? These are used to prioritize your collections, and there are various different scorecards. So we've got propensity to pay, probability of missing next payment, that's a roll score, also known as a roll scorecard, payment projection score, and another one being probability of default. These are all pure collection scorecards. In the red category, we've got contactability. So you can build models for the probability of making a contact, and you can also build models for the right time to call. So I'm going to get hold of this person, but when is the best time to call to get hold of this person? And so those are two different types of models, and those are classified in the contactability. In the yellow category, we got actually pre-delinquency scorecards. These are scorecards used in increasingly common now within the up-to-date customers. So we want to prevent customers from rolling 30 days past due. We want to prevent them rolling into a cycle delinquent 1 state. And as such, the up-to-date customers, we run through a scorecard. And those who are high risk of rolling, we maybe send them a message via SMS or text, or give them a phone call, just a friendly reminder that they have a payment due on a certain date. So there's pre-delinquency scorecard. Then the next one is payment scorecards. These could be optimal settlements. These could be optimal payments. So what if I want to restructure an account, what is the optimal payment I should ask from the customer? Or if it is a very low balance, what is the optimal settlement I should ask for the customer? Because I know I'm not going to get the full amount out of this customer. I know that it will cost me money if I continue to call this customer for the next few months. Where can we strike a deal where I'm actually making a bit of money and the customer is being left alone and they're accepting that? So that's optimal settlement. And then also what's becoming increasingly popular, particularly within the digital collection space, is the use of optimal channel. And this might be, what is the optimal channel in which to contact the customer? Should I contact them on WhatsApp? Should I contact them on Facebook? Should I contact them through the call center on their phone? Should I send them an SMS? Should I send them a letter? All of these are optional. Are options, and some channels are resonate more with some customers and other channels more with others, and you can actually build models to predict what channel is the best. And then there's some other ones around probability of capturing a promise to pay, probability of keeping a promise to pay. Those are kind of subcategories of collection scorecards that are also used. So you can see within the collection space, people, a lot of organizations, you speak to them, do you have a collection scorecard? They will say, yes, we do. It's a probability of default scorecard. That's what we will find for the most part. But there are actually many other scorecards that are available out there. One thing that's critical when it comes to scorecards is the data that is used within scorecards. So I'm just going to cover that very quickly. The typical data that we see used in scorecards, and the scorecards that I mentioned earlier, are as follows. Customer behavioral data. This is the primary data that we use. This would link to an organization, the customer's behavior data with the organization, things like how long they've been on their book. So when I talk about payment behavior, how many payments did they miss over the last 6 months? What percentage have they paid for the amount that was outstanding over the last 3 months? All of that is data that is used quite significantly within the collection scorecard space. Balance to loan amount, so what portion of the account is left to pay. PTP performance, has the customer broken promises to pay before? Has the customer kept promises to pay? Has the customer had any promises to pay? All that information can be used within the collection scorecard. Then the next category is credit bureau information. And as your credit bureaus grow and become more and more sophisticated, as the customer comes under pressure, it's important to understand how stressed the customer is at at the other organizations where they owe money. And what we find is that this is a good way of differentiating between your can't pays and your won't pays. So the can't pays may be struggling everywhere, and your won't pays, well, they might just be deciding not to pay you, but they may be paying others, and you can take different actions based on that. But of course, the data that's used here, delinquencies on other accounts, number of accounts, behavior in the last 3, 6, 12, 24 months, i.e. How many missed payments have they made at other accounts. It all depends on the sophistication of the data available on the bureau as to what you can do and what you can't do. Then to a lesser extent, we have demographic information. We might want to know information on the age of the customer, how big their number of dependencies are, This information often is gathered at time of origination, but we often can use this data in the scorecards to actually determine whether the person could be stressed because they've got a lot of financial commitments, and that's when we use demographic information. And then the last category there is contactability information, particularly for those contactability scorecards. So we want to know how many calls we made to the customer on a certain number. We want to know how many right person connects we've made with that customer. How many contacts have we made at all with the customer? All of that information is gathered and can be used within the contactability scores. So just to sort of, I've listed a lot of scorecards. I just want to sort of make it a little simpler. So collection scorecards at different stages. So for the accounts that are cycle delinquent 0, we use the term cycle delinquent. That means how many months delinquent they are. So cycle delinquent 0 means they're up to date and a regular customer paying and everything. We have the option of a pre-delinquency scorecard. Okay, so these are the collection scorecards. For cycle delinquents 1, 2, and 3, or sometimes just 1 and 2, depends. We could use a probability of default scorecard, or we could use a roll scorecard. So those are on the, what we call the early stage collections. We use those types of scorecards. Then the cycle delinquents 4+, we use a propensity to pay scorecard or a payment projection score. So whereas cycles 1, 2, and 3, so a PD scorecard, for example, we would be looking to see whether an account is likely to go to 4+. When a customer's already at 4+, there's a 100% chance they'll be at 4+ because they're already at 4+, and therefore you need to use a different scorecard. And that's why we use things like propensity to pay scorecard. And this could be a scorecard where we look at whether there's likely to be a payment in the next 3 months or not from this customer. So these are what we call late stage delinquency scorecards. The green categories there, we've got payment projection score that determines what we're likely, how much the customer is likely to pay of the outstanding debt over the next, say, 24 months, often used. Or a settlement scorecard, this is the likelihood, the amount of money the customer is likely to pay over the lifetime of the loan. So those are payment projection scores and settlement scores. So that just really sort of summarizes what you might use. We generally find the customers will use, our customers or clients will use, the lenders will use one of these categories within each category. So they won't use a PD score and a roll score. They'll just use, say, a roll score, and they won't use propensity to pay score and a payment projection score. They'll just use maybe one of those two, or maybe settlement score. So one per category. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the probability of default score. Now, these are quite common. They're used, if you're in a bank, they're used within regulatory capital models, Basel, for example. Some are using, depending on where you've done it, your IFRS 9 models. They're used in provision calculations. They're used as behavioral scorecards as well, which could be for your existing customers to cross and upsell and maybe do credit limit increases or top-ups and all that sort of thing within revolving products. So probability of default scores are used quite extensively, not just in collections. So they're quite popular, and the great thing about them is you build them once, and then you can use them for a variety of different tasks. So let's just have a look at basically what they mean. So we've got the black databases there, or data sets there, observational data from, this is how we build the scorecards, January through to December each month. And what we do is we look at, say, we take the January file and we look at the customer up in January 2020, so 12 months later, and we say, did the customer, how many payments did the customer miss? How many missed payments did the customer have during that time? And if it's between 0 and 2, then we will classify that customer as a good customer. If it's 4 or more, then we will classify that customer as a bad customer. And normally the 3, we classify that customer as an indeterminate customer. So we actually don't use that in the modeling. So once we've got our goods and we've got our bads, we're able to then model with that. But we don't just take from January, we actually take from all the months. So we'll take February, we'll look back from February 2020 back, and March 2019, we'll look March 2020 back, etc., etc. So each month we will look 12 months ahead and then look back from there to see how each customer had behaved. And we'll classify a customer as a good or a bad customer. And we'll combine all of that data into one data set, and that data will then be used for the modeling process. Normally we split the data set into two. We have a build set, and then we have a holdout set. So we actually test our models off a holdout set. And we may even have an out of time set where we actually look at and see whether in a different time period, whether the model would have predicted in the same way. And we look for stability as much as possible within the scorecard itself. But in this example, there would be, I would suggest there would be a fair bit of concern around the period of March, April, May, June, July, because perhaps the data is quite different there because of payment holidays and because of the fact that the credit bureaus are not taking any negative information during that time. But nevertheless, that's your probability of default score. The reason why we take 12 months of information, sometimes we even take 24 months, is that we want to do through the cycle modeling. And what I mean by through the cycle modeling, I want to take data from each month or each period of time, key period during the year, because we may find the customers in November behave very different than the customers, say, in April. And so the data would model very differently. If I take data from all the months, I can then get a smooth relationship. I get a more even relationship between expected performance across the different time periods in the year, which means the model can be used throughout the following year when I go live. Okay, so that's a probability of default score. The other model next model I want to look at, and you'll see how different these models are, is a role scorecard. And these are very useful. And what I find is that organizations that adopt a role card actually have better discrimination overall and better performance than using a PD score. A PD is not bad, but a role card, if done properly, can be more predictive. And a role card is pretty straightforward. So let's take the January file again. What we do is we look in February, the very next month, to see whether the customer made a successful payment or not. If she did, then we'll say she made a successful payment and she's good. And if she didn't, then she didn't make a successful payment. She had a missed payment and she's bad. And that's quite straightforward, the definition there. And we don't just take from January, we take from April, we take from July, we take from October. So normally 4 times during the year. And then again, reflecting the different cycles within the year. So to make sure that we've smoothed out and that we've got a reflection of what happens throughout the year. And we take all that data and we put it into a modeling sample, and we also have the holdout sample as well. So we build on the modeling sample and we test on the holdout sample. If the models appear stable, then we're comfortable with the model and we can apply it. So that's the role card. It was built very differently, only 1 month outcome for role cards, not 12 months outcome looking back and various classifications. It's more complicated to build a PD model, but as I said earlier, more applications for a PD model, but a role card is used, is more simple to build on. The third type of scorecard, it was the green categories in the previous the slide, a couple of slides back, is your payment projection score or your settlement scorecards. Okay, so it's built very differently. So imagine all your account, you've got a whole bunch of accounts that are four or more payments in arrears. So we say that they have defaulted. So these are defaulted accounts. They are in a stage of late collections. What we do with these accounts is we apply what we call a payment projection score or a settlement score. And we're going to look at payment projection in this example. And what the payment projection does is it takes previous accounts and it says, listen, when they reached default and they were in a certain state, let's score them to deter, and that score reflects what percentage they are likely to pay of their outstanding amount in the next 2 years. So what percentage are they likely to pay? And it's obviously a number between 0 and 100. So if we take the blue customer, we see the customer in the bottom here, you've got month 1, and the customer made a big payment in month 1, and then made payments in month 2, month 3, month 4, etc., etc. Eventually, they flatten out here in about month 19, and they make no more payments before month 24. At that stage, they've made 80%. They've paid up 80% of their outstanding due. The teal color here does a similar sort of pattern, but flattens out earlier, makes another bit of payment, and flattens out here and makes up to 70% of their outstanding amount due. The orange, different pattern, makes some payments in up to month 8 and then actually makes no payments thereafter. They are 40% that they make in total. And then the gray customer is the worst of the lot, and this customer, he doesn't make a payment in the first month. He makes a payment in month 3, month 4, month 5, and then really it flattens out, and he only ends up after 2 years making 10% of the outstanding amount due. So we've basically got a picture for every one of these customers in terms of how much of their outstanding amount due do they pay in the next 24 months. And what we do there is we classify the customer twice. We classify them as the first customer 80% good and 20% bad. The teal customer 70% good, 30% bad. Orange 40% good, 60% bad. And the last one, the gray, only 10% good and 90% bad. And we put the good portions all in a modeling sample and put the bad portions in a modeling sample, and we build based on that. And that's where we get a payment projection score. So the score that we get out of it will reflect the percentage that they are likely to pay ultimately after 24 months. And the ones with the lowest score means they'll pay less, and the ones with the highest score means they will pay more. And that's how a payment projection score works. And we apply this, of course, to the 4+ accounts, the accounts that are already default and in the late stage of collections. Okay, so just a bit of a summary here. Cycle delinquency 0. We use a pre-delinquency scorecards. What we do with these scorecards is we look to see whether there's a missed payment in the next 3 months. That's how we build. So we'll know what probability there is likelihood of the customer missing a payment in the next 3 months. And if there's a high likelihood, we can make an action to call that customer before they get into trouble. Then the early stage collection, we could use a PD scorecard, which is 4+ within the next 12 months, as I illustrated earlier, and a roll scorecard, which reflects whether the customer will miss their next payment. And either one of these scorecards will be used in the early stage. With roll scorecards, if you've got a very large book, what we find customers will do is they'll build separate roll scorecards for 1 to 2. So cycle delinquents 1 to roll into 2. And then we've got cycle delinquents 2 to roll into 3, and cycle delinquent 3 to roll into 4. So you can actually build multiple different roll scorecards based on the current stage of that account. And then the late stage collection, we've got either a propensity to scorecard, propensity to pay scorecard, which is a bit like the inverse of a pre-delinquency scorecard, which is a successful payment in the next 3 months. It can also be a continuous outcome as well. Payment projection score is a continuous outcome, normally look at the next 24 months, for example. And then a settlement scorecard looks at the lifetime payment. Just to comment on the payment projection score the next 24 months. If you're dealing with a home loans book with very large terms, or even very large maybe vehicle finance terms, which can be 7 or 8 years these days, then you may want to look at a period longer than 24 months, because customers might have gone into default early in their, and if they start paying, they won't ever pay off that outstanding amount within 24 months. So normally the 24 months is for shorter term products. So maybe personal loans, which are 1 to 3 years, something like that. Okay. So now we're going to look at using a scorecard in a collection strategy. For those who are already doing this, this should be fairly should be fairly obvious to you. For those not doing this yet, perhaps there's something here that you can take away. I want to just make a few points. First of all, once you've calculated a score, they should be embedded within a collection strategy. They are normally at the bottom of the tree. Okay, so we normally do segmentation at the top of the tree on various things, which I'll mention later. And then at the end, we normally segment on score. They're used for mature accounts older than 6 months. The reason why we do that, sometimes older than 4 months is fine. The reason why we do that is because we need enough data, historic data, to score the customer. So the customer comes onto your book this month, and then next month they go into collections. There's no point scoring them, because I'll be looking at performance over the last 6 months and I won't have any information on them because they've only been on book for 1 month. That's why we need mature accounts. So the immature accounts we normally deal with separately without using a score. Early stage scores are used for cycles delinquent 1, 2, and 3. And then payment projection scores are used for cycles 4+. And then normally what happens thereafter, you're able to sort within each scenario your accounts, and they're not often sorted by balance or something called balance at risk. And that means that balance at risk incorporates score and balance together to determine what portion of the outstanding amount is likely to be lost. So those are the key points I want to make for collection strategies. Right, so we're going to move on to an example of a collection strategy tree. If I just start at the top, this is a simplified version. It only has 5 levels, or 6 levels, sorry. Some of the scorecards or some of the strategies we've worked on have 15, 20 levels, and they can be very complicated. Those are larger books normally. But for smaller books, this is the sort of thing that you'd normally see. But I don't have enough space on the page to represent what we'd see with larger books. So you just bear with me. I've given you a portion of a tree. So one of the first splitters is normally status class. Status class would have information whether the account is illegal, maybe there's a deceased account, maybe they're under debt review, or whatever the local equivalent is. There's some other maybe there are accounts under administration, for example. These would all be in special status classes or block code holds. For those who are not in block codes or not in status, have no status class, we put them through this branch of the tree. And then the first split is cycles delinquent. And here what we do is we have various states of cycle delinquent, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4+ in this example. What I've got is the branch of 1. I then have PTP status. So PTP will either be broken. Normally these will be prioritized almost first. The most important accounts to get hold of is the broken PTPs. Or there's a promise in effect, and these would go to a hold queue normally. You wouldn't do anything, maybe a reminder when the payment is nearly due. And then the majority of the accounts will go through the none status. That means there's no promise to pay in effect or broken promise. Those who are in that state, we then go to months on book. Remember, I've split them into 3, 0 to 1. These accounts will be the first payment default. You might want to check on fraud for these accounts. The 2 to 5s, these are your early stage where we don't have enough data to score you. So we would put you through a separate branch and maybe split by balance next. And then the 6+ are your majority of your book. Then the next step is to have balance. low balance and high balance. Sometimes we have 4 or 5 splits here in different balance ranges, maybe relating to different products, etc. But this is a simpler example. So we've got low balance and high balance here. And we then have them split by score right at the end. Remember I said to you earlier that score is used to at the end of the strategy tree, at the bottom of the strategy tree. And we split them into low, medium, and high scores, and this one also low, medium, and high scores. And from here, we're able to prioritize the accounts, and the priority would determine when we put these accounts in queues, when we send them SMSs, whether we send them a harsh message or whether we send them a friendly message. All that sort of thing can be done through managing your scenario. So the high balance, high score, you might say, well, these guys are very important to get hold of and they should be high priority. No, a lot of these guys with high scores will self-cure. They may just need a friendly reminder, that's all. So they may not have a high priority where we need to give them a harsh call. And that's why we put them in low priority. Low priority, also the low balance, high score. Then we've got medium scores. In this case, they are crucial to get hold of, and we put them in as high priority. They're low priority with a low balance. Low balances we're going to chase after last. And then the low scores with a high balance, the low scores with a low balance, we've got them as high priority. And these guys we need to run after because there's a lot to be lost here, particularly in the high balance, low score. I'm being muted. Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry, I was muted for a minute. So these are the scenarios and these are the different actions that happen. There will be different actions that happen, but this is how you use your score within a collection strategy in the early stage. The late stage is slightly different. So we're looking at your 4 pluses here, the accounts that don't have a promise to pay. And we put all the accounts through regardless of months on book. And we've got low balance and high balance here. And here we've split them into different score bands. I've got high score, medium score, low score, and very low score. The very low score here, I want to prioritize for a debt sale. So these accounts we don't expect to get much of from at all. And therefore it's a waste of our time to chase after these accounts. We may want to look at selling that debt. Not all organizations do debt sale, but for those who do, this is how they would prioritize their debt sale. The low balances have a low score, so they would have a slightly higher cutoff for their debt sale. But again, it's looking at what portion they're likely to get out of that, chasing those accounts. This group here, the low score here and high balance, we would like to maybe outsource some of these accounts to an external debt collector as a contingency to chase after the debt. And so if you have an outsourcing arrangement, this is where it would happen in this sort of band, the low score. And then you've got your medium priority and high priorities set here. And similarly with the low balance, you've got your outsource and medium priorities there. So that's roughly how we would look to do a segmentation in the decision tree. This tree is normally deployed within a collection management system. So collection management systems are what govern this tree. These score cutoffs are put in place, but they can be amended because it's very important to understand what volume of accounts are expected within each of these scenarios. Because you need to assign your team to work those scenarios. And it is through the correct segmentation and the assignment of your team and having a very visible strategy that enables you to actually understand what effect a new strategy is going to have on your team. So you need to have a collection management system that can actually do a decent collection management strategy volume testing and all that sort of thing. So looking at deployment of a collection score. So I mentioned that collection management system. The key components are here. Collection management system sits at the bottom, the end of the whole process. We would suggest you have, just before the collection management system, you have your decision engine. Decision engine is used for scoring, and that's where your scorecards are deployed and you're able to calculate scores. And that is from a file that is received from the host system of record. The system of record, or the loans management system, is sitting in the blue box. An a file is produced and sent through to the decision engine. The decision engine scores the account and then sends it through to the collection management system. The collection management system segments the account and then allows your collectors to get on collecting the accounts in the correct order. So collection management systems need to have strategies that can be deployed by management, the ability to test strategies to understand the operational impact, and determine scenarios and appropriate actions. So what sort of actions, what SMSs do we want sent out on day 1? What SMSs do we want sent out on day 3? What priority do we want the accounts to be worked? Which team? Who do we want on which team, and which team must work which group of accounts first? If you're taking credit bureau information, what we normally find is the credit information, the key fields from the credit bureau record would be sent into to merge with the accounts and into the system of record. Some will have it outside, but others will have it coming into the system of record, and then that information will be fed into the decision engine there. Yeah. Okay, so that's really there's a hell of a lot more that I could talk about around, but I want to focus more on the scorecards. Okay, I'm now going to jump on to machine learning. So we talked about scoring. I just want to cover some things on machine learning. I'm not going to look at it too technically. I'm just going to look at some of the key components that are required and key considerations that you need for to deploy machine learning in your world. I think it's quite a misunderstood area of modeling, particularly people outside of the modeling world, around what is required when it comes to machine learning. Everybody we get queries from our clients asking us for machine learning when they're actually wanting a scorecard. You don't need machine learning. Machine learning will give you an additional benefit, an additional lift, but you don't need it. If you don't have scoring, start with scorecards. Don't run up that staircase that I showed you earlier right to the top. Rather start taking one step at a time. So you can make a huge additional steps with introduction of scorecards within your process and having a decent strategy tree. Okay, so what is meant by machine learning really is the first thing I'd like to ask you. So one of the thoughts when you say machine learning is a model that continuously updates automatically. What we find in the credit space and the collection space is that is seldom the case. When people talk about machine learning, they don't talk about that per se, but they rather talk about the fact that they can rapidly build and deploy models. And so there is still some user interaction with the models. It's not just press a button and today there's a model, tomorrow there's a new model, the next day there's a new model, and nobody sees them. Normally there is, excuse me, normally there's interaction with a user who will both check on the model, oversee the models, and actually maybe even play a role within manually deploying it. But the point is, building a scorecard normally may take a process which involves, say, 3 to 4 months to build from scratch. In machine learning, once you've got a machine learning environment down, you can do this within a few days. So that's what we talk about. We don't say it's completely automated, but we do say that it's rapidly built and deployed. So some of the challenges with machine learning models, one of the challenges when we talk about machine learning models is explainability. In the credit world, there is a lot of pressure to be able to explain what you are doing, what the model is doing. With machine learning, with certain techniques that we use in machine learning, often it's very difficult to explain what the model is doing. We know it's predictive, but we don't know how it is discriminating between one customer to the next. Automation is a challenge. We'll talk about what the key component that's needed on that side of things. Aggregation is also critical, and this is also very critical in the collection space, so we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then the volume management, just the sheer volume of data is quite challenging. So we've just deployed a machine learning environment at the largest external debt collector in Africa, and they are processing hundreds of millions of fields of data every day to get hundreds of millions of scores ready for the collection segmentation that they do. And it was quite an endeavor to actually get to the point where you could process that data with the volumes involved. And so volume management is quite critical. But the good thing about collection, so if you're working in credit generally, if you said to me, listen, I want to build machine learning models for originations, I'll say that will be tricky, because normally in credit, your models have to go through a model valuation board and normally a credit management committee and all that sort of thing. And they have to have explainability. You have to explain, what's the pattern with age? What's the pattern with marital status? Does it make sense what the model is doing? Whereas a lot of machine learning models, it's very difficult to understand exactly what's happening, as I said. And so in the credit world, a lot of credit committees would not allow machine learning for the purpose of origination scoring. But in collections, it's less important. Collections, we don't care what is used to predict whether somebody's going to roll, so long as we predict whether somebody's going to roll. It just means we're getting a phone call to them earlier if they are at higher risk. And so there's less pressure on explainability, there's less pressure on credit committees, and as such, we believe that collection models are ideal candidates for machine learning if you have the infrastructure available to you. So we're going to just look at some of the key components within the machine learning environment. I showed you a very high-level schematic of what a collections scoring process would look like between your host system and your collection management system. But this is a little bit more involved when it comes to data management and within the machine learning space. So what we normally say is we have data and we ingest it into the data management platform over here. So that's taking files that are constantly received by the data management platform. We clean the files, we check the files for stability and that they're all correct. And once we've done all of that, we go into what we call, this is an automated process, into feature creation. Feature creation is the creation of aggregated variables. So it might be that we take a snapshot of an account this month, and we then, in the data wrangling process, we then add that snapshot of the account from the last 6 months, and now we've got a view of the account over the last 6 months. And then feature creation would then look at, say, the average payment over the last 6 months, or it might look at the number of times the customer missed a payment over the last 6 months. That's what we would do within feature creation. Then, once we've created features, we are then able to execute the models, and then we are able to send the result back to the data source or into a collection management system. So that's the red block. Once also from this, we are able to send the data into what we call the modeling data set creation. This is what we call the data asset. And this data asset is always ready to be used within a modeling exercise. So we create a data asset. So every time we take data, say it's every day or every month, we take the data, we create the features, and we send that all through scoring and then back into the modeling data set creation. This adds to, every month we add to the modeling, what we call the data asset. And then this data asset is what gets used when we come to the green block, which is the retraining environment. So we may decide, listen, every 6 months we want to retrain, and we then can go directly to this pre-configured data asset that we can extract the data and retrain the models and then redeploy them in the execution engine. All the time we should be monitoring. We should be monitoring the performance of the models. We should be monitoring the stability of the data, and that is done in the blue block here. And so there's various technology that you would use. You have the option to go into the cloud, the likes of Amazon Web Services or Azure, for example. They have a lot of these components. You can also deploy this on-prem. We've done that with our own technology as well. And then there's tools like SQL Spark. There's tools like SSIS, SSRS. There's tools like Python as well. So the green block, the modeling environment that we see most of our clients are using Python for modeling, and they are deploying and executing the models also through Python as well. So that's essentially what we're talking about when we're in the machine learning. I wouldn't rush into it if you are still struggling to get scores into your environment. You're not missing out on a whole lot. But if you do have a mature environment with scores and you are adopting this technology, then collections does involve a really great environment for you to deploy machine learning models. Okay, just on the modeling side of things, the other great thing about machine learning, so when you build a scorecard, often you're using one technique to build scorecards. So now when you're building machine learning models, often the machine learning models will be using a variety of different modeling techniques. And this is what's great about the process that we go under. So this last example that I mentioned earlier, that the biggest debt collector in Africa is using our models, is that we were able to build models for them, including right time to call and payment, breaking payment promises to pay, and probability of default score and payment projection score. We were able to build all of these models, but actually what we did is we utilized all those models below: the light GBM, XGBoost, random forest, logistic regression, lasso, and neural networks. We were actually able to build different models, and each model had different abilities for different types of problems. And we weren't sure at the beginning what modeling techniques would be best for which problems, but we found over time what models were best for which problems. And so the great thing about it is through Python, we were using the different Python libraries, which allows us to model with these different approaches. And if you do that, you're able to then actually model the accounts concurrently. And yes, certain modeling techniques are more appropriate for certain problems. And models can be built concurrently. And so we built the models concurrently, and every business problem we came across, we built 25 different models. And from those 25 different models, we were able to find the model that worked the best, which was the most stable model, which is the most predictive model. And then we were able to adopt that model as our machine learning model. And this is a process that we can go through time and time again when we retrain our models, which is great. We found Spark SQL particularly useful as it allows for the time series and customer level aggregations. Okay. And now I want to touch on contactability scores, particularly right time to call. So right time to call models are a bit different to the rest of the models. The rest of the models, we're building a model based on the customer. On right time to call, we actually build models based on a phone number. So we take a customer. Here we go. If you see the picture below, John Doe. John Doe's got 3 phone numbers, and we build a model based on each of those phone numbers about what is the best time to contact the customer. Is it the morning, afternoon, evening, or weekend? And we do this for all of John Doe's phone numbers. And from that, we're able to utilize that information for a variety of different purposes. For example, prioritizing accounts for trace. Where there was a low probability of contacting the customer over all their phone numbers, at any time, we then said this account should be we should find new phone numbers for this customer. We also were able to use the information to determine what time to call a customer. So this is right time to call. So if it was, we might have chosen morning or afternoon for this customer, and we would phone them on their work number because it's green. Or we might have chosen their cell phone number to phone them in the evening. All of those, we actually could call this customer at any time of day. So we had a phone number for that. We could also use this model for prioritizing phone numbers in the dialer. So every time a customer is put into a campaign and we say we've got a morning campaign, we would then prioritize the accounts in terms of who to call at what time of day. So for example, if it was morning, you would prioritize the work phone number first, then the cellular number, then the home phone number third. And that's how we would do it. And the afternoon would be the same, but the evening would be different. So prioritizing phone numbers in the dialer, and then also ordering campaigns. We'd be able to order the campaigns by perhaps the best account to phone at any one time, the best phone number to phone at any one time. So you're actually able to use a right time to call model or contactability score for a variety of different approaches. Just a comment on collection and contactability scores. Collection scores are used to prioritize your accounts for collections. Contactability scores are used to determine your campaigns and prioritize them. Yes, you might use trace within your collection score. You might use trace within your collection strategy, and that might use the contactability score. But generally, this is the rule of thumb that we use. Collection scores are used in the collection management system, and contactability scores may be used in a dialer. Okay, then just a comment on settlement scores. I covered a lot of this earlier. These are what we call continuous outcome models. Remember, I showed you that diagram on the top right. These could be net present value models, settlement models, payment projection models, and they can be used multiple places in collections as well. I mentioned some of these. Firstly, prioritizing late stage collection matters. We showed that in the example of the strategy tree. The next is determining which accounts to outsource to an external debt collector. So those would be your medium risk accounts, your lower score accounts. And then your very low score accounts, you might help you determine a fair price for debt sales. So it might be shown that for a certain account, we expect to collect five shillings for every 100 shillings of debt for a certain account, so 5%. And as a result, we know then that a debt sale offer of more than 5 or more % would be beneficial to the organization, and we should take up that offer. If it was lower than 5%, then we have to look at the operational cost impact of trying to collect on that customer, and we can therefore determine from that whether the other price would be acceptable. So debt sale is a very important area for utilizing these continuous outcome models. And then obviously use within provisioning models as well. These models can be used in the provisioning space as well. So in summary, I'm just over an hour. In summary, pressure, collections under sustained pressure globally in 2020, 2021. As a result, we need to use tools at our disposal for the better prioritization of collections, as well as the correct treatment of customers. There's quite a lot of tools and themes coming out this year, and we've seen quite a lot of movement within the collection space globally. Scorecards. Utilizing scorecards helps organizations better prioritize collections. And there are different types of scorecards to the point on variety. There are many collection scorecards that can be used. Each requires a different modeling approach. We talked about the different modeling approaches that are used. Data use, collection history, credit bureau data, demographics, dialer data. There's a lot of different data that's used. You need to be able to have the ability to utilize this data operationally when it comes to scoring, but nevertheless, this data is all useful within the collection scoring process. Collection scores are usually used at the end of strategies. So that's the early stage scores as well as the late stage scores. Deployment. Scorecards need a decision engine or business rules management system in which to be deployed. And this is normally integrated with your collection management system. Then settlement scorecards, these can be used for late collection prioritization, escalation to debt sale, and settlement negotiation. And the last point I made is on machine learning. It's great for collection models, but a lot is required. Data management platform, execution engine, data asset, reporting, all of that is important for deploying machine learning in your environment. So if you've got the willingness to invest and you have a large enough organization, then machine learning can be adopted by you. Last point, we'd like to hear from you. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, found it interesting, if you have, well, we'll see if there are any questions, but if you have any further questions you'd like to ask off site privately, then feel free to get hold of us about collections, scorecards, or credit in general. We also have industry blogs that we publish fairly regularly. There's quite a lot in our database around collections. You'll be able to see what we talk about and what we've experienced in our world. So please subscribe. You'll find us on www.principa.coza. Right, over to you, Lemuel.
Thanks, Maidon. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation, taking us through collection strategies and scorecards and how we can actually apply them. I think I like the, in summary, the last slide where you actually just capped everything together. So thanks for the insightful presentation. So currently, sorry, at the moment, I want us to take, there are two questions on the chat. I know we are a little bit pressed of time, but there are two questions on the chat. I'll quickly read them out. So this is from Felix. So first question, do we talk of optimal channels or legal channels that can be proven during litigation? I think if I would take you back to your presentation just to get to know where the question was actually coming from, but you could also just kindly answer that question. Or I think it's related to the second question. Let me just read it out. So he's also asking, why did you leave out cases under legal in your data modeling? I think the questions are related. So Thomas, if you could take those two questions first.
Okay, so just on the optimal channel, we're talking more the engagement channel for the customer. So that's the main thing. There are legal models as well. The other thing to mention is escalation to legal. That also could be used. So where there's a very low probability of payment, there's also customers that won't insistent and they won't pay. Then an escalation of early escalation to legal can be done, and you can use your scorecard for that process. When I was talking about on this slide, the optimal channel, I was talking more around the engagement channel, but you can use models to choose a legal avenue in which to engage to get cash back from the customer.
Okay, thanks for that. Next question is by Wandiri. So what does Thomas see AI playing in the credit or collections industry? I think that's related to the section on machine learning. So over to you, Thomas.
So what's the question? What does AI play
in the credit / collections industry?
So as I said, we are seeing customers adopt different modeling techniques, and as I said, because there's less governance over collection models, we're seeing the ability to rapidly model and deploy collection scorecards is coming to the fore. So we're seeing larger organizations adopt machine learning in this space. In terms of AI, we are seeing the adoption of, for example, chatbots within the collection space as well for self-service collection. When we talk about AI, we will be talking about ability for natural language processing and all that sort of thing within the engagement process of the customer for self-service. We also may use AI for the ability to negotiate a settlement with the customer as well. So I think it's an exciting space. I don't think everybody should be rushing to it if they're not doing some of the basics first. Do the basics best. I think always go back to that. Do the basics best, and then look thereafter to do the more exciting stuff. So we are seeing it in our market. The more advanced organizations are adopting AI and machine learning to improve their collections.
Thanks, Thomas. For the final question, this is from Jacob. He's asking, which machines or systems would you recommend? So I don't know, Jacob, you could kindly also clarify so that we get to know if you're talking of software. Thomas, maybe you could speak to, it's a little bit vague, but maybe you could speak to it, maybe in terms of, yes, he's actually confirmed. So which software would you recommend? And maybe you could actually speak to your softwares, for instance.
Yeah, so I mentioned right at the beginning, but now it's probably best coming back to it. We offer a collection management system, which is being deployed within Kenya right now. It's being deployed, I think, in about 13, 14 different countries, both in Africa and the Middle East, and it's used as a collection management system. We also we have a chatbot as well that is integrated within that collection management system for self-service collections, which is quite critical. We're building a collection app as well within the collection management system as well. For deploying scorecards, we're talking about decision engine. We have a decision engine called Decision Smart, and that you'll be able to see this information on our website. But Decision Smart is a decision engine that you can deploy scorecards and strategies and rules and matrices and calculations as well, affordability calculations you may want to calculate for your customers. All of that sort of thing can be done through your decision engine called and ours is called Decision Smart. Yeah, so if anybody would like to see what organizations are using like our software, we're happy to also put together a demo for you, and you'll be able to actually have a look and see what's available, what your competitors or what other organizations in the market are doing in that space. But yeah, we have a collection management system, Collect Smart, and we have a decision engine, Decision Smart.
Great. Thanks for answering those questions. Right now, we don't have any further. Okay, I think there's one more. So Vincent is asking, are there any institutions locally using the advanced models from your end? I think you answered that question. Or locally.
Yeah,
I think maybe you could point out.
So we have an organization locally, Letsejo, that is operations there that are using our models and our collection engine and our decision engine.
Great. So I think that answers your question. And he'll also, after this session, we'll also be sharing his presentation, and we'll also give you a link to the video where you'll be able to also just go through what he's spoken about, or his presentation for any further clarification if need be. So I think this session is really timely as financial institutions actually are now struggling. Some have actually reported reduced profitability, while we've also had others who've slid into loss territory. So for instance, for Tier 1 banks, they've actually reported reduced profitability, and for some microfinance institutions, they're actually further down into loss territory. So I would want to encourage our members to actually take advantage of this opportunity to actually learn and to actually also engage principal even further so that they can be able to get a solution that can also be able to speak to their needs. So I would want to give much thanks to Thomas Maidon, that's the head of credit and analytics at Principal. I'd also want to thank his colleagues, that's Belinda and Vanessa from the Principal end. And I would also want to thank you, our members, for taking and making time to actually attend this webinar. So thank you very much, and see you next time. I think one more item. I think let me just take you through. Hannah, if you could kindly assist me mute those persons. I would also want to take you through. I would want to share my screen at this point in time. So CS Kenya is also, will be having a training from the 9th to 11th December on credit risk management, a refresh for the new normal. So it's going to be a 3-day training, and we'll actually be looking at credit management, and we'll also be looking at collections, the credit information sharing toolkits, and we'll also be looking at regulation in terms of data protection 2019, what it holds for consumer protection. We'll also be looking at digital identity with the recently launched Huduma number. And we'll also be going or taking you through the CRB regulations 2020 and its implications in terms of compliance. So we'll also email you the same. And we encourage you to take this opportunity to also have a refresh in terms of your knowledge base. So at this point in time, I would want us to close. So you may leave at your pleasure. And thank you very much for attending today's session.
Thank you, everybody.